Now let's return to this issue of delays on Britain's rail network, which have reached their highest level for 13 years, no less. Figures by the Office of Rail and Road show that 1 in 7 operators fell short of the industry's standard measure of punctuality. Well, joining me now from South West London is the visiting Professor of Forecasting and Innovation at London South Bank University, James Woodhousen. Very good to talk to you, Professor Woodhousen. Now, I notice the title of your professorship is Forecasting and Innovation. That's presumably what's been in short supply at some of these rail operators.
Well, I think that's quite right, but I fear that it's too easy to blame the chaos, Dermot, on the plain incompetence of the operators and also of Transport Minister Chris Grayling. I think what's happened is a bit like Grenfell, really. Everybody has outsourced responsibility to somebody else. And when you do that and you're in politics or in running a train, things get so Byzantine and nobody will be accountable, and your willingness to see the wood from the trees begins to atrophy. So, we just don't have the authority or the courage with our operating companies in the rail and with our ministers to push forward a way to get out of all this faffing. The faffing in the mind turns out to be do-nothing confusion right down to timetables nowadays. And I think that's really an indictment of where we've got to.
Faffing. So, I mean, you could describe it then almost as a circular firing squad of blame. The rail operators pointing at the network provider, pointing at the government, etc., etc. And the circle of blame goes round with no one stepping up and taking responsibility.
Well, I think that's exactly right, but I think it's gone beyond a rail issue now. I mean, it's far too easy to blame HS2 for sucking up all the money. I don't believe HS2 will happen, given we can't make a timetable happen at the moment. But we're also seeing the collapse of buses, the collapse of reliability at airports. We're building about 8 miles of new main road or motorway a year in Britain at the moment, Dermot. So it's not just rail transport, every kind of transport, but it goes even further than that. I think what's really happening is that the train companies and Christopher Grayling really are treating passengers with contempt, same kind of contempt that was visited upon the tenants in Grenfell by the local council and the arm's length management organisation for many years. They're not passengers anymore. They're not consumers, certainly, although we're called that. They're just punters who can be messed around with at will. And I think they will reap the whirlwind up in the Midlands and up north if any of the sentiment against what's happening in rail is connected in any way with Brexit. I think it shows a contempt on the path of London, Westminster, and the ruling elite in the southeast to allow the railways to deteriorate in this manner. And I think another thing is very clear, which if you look at the yellow vest protests in France, it must be obvious to every frustrated commuter that railway workers and railway engineers could do a better job than Chris Grayling. That must be evident to everybody by now.
There's a lot in the pot there. Just though on the organisation, it seems like you're making quite a potent argument for more centralisation, kind of reversing, 3 decades of government policy of decentralisation.
No, I'm not quite doing that, Dermot. I mean, I think that's tempting, right? From a rational point of view, one would like to believe that a single system would iron out all the bumps, but it's not quite so simple because British Rail was nothing to write home about. Nationalisation now would create a whole bundle of confusion and there would be a great amount of extra chaos, I think. It's not about ownership, the railways. It's about resolve, willpower, having clear goals. The government and the operators don't have that, and then bringing in the new technology to really solve the problems. I don't think Chris Grayling would know what electricity was if it gave him a shock. There are no engineers or technologists who are really putting forward serious alternatives to what's happening at the moment. And we're dealing with, in the case of the line to Scotland, East Coast Line, we're dealing with rolling stock 30 years old. I want a practical fix all the way down the line, and I don't want to hear any more about how by travelling we are wrecking the planet and how travel must be stigmatized. Is your journey really necessary? Can't we all do it through Skype? Transport is absolutely essential to the future of this country, in or outside the EU, and it's time people grasped the nettle when they're in power and laid out a clear plan with high technology to make a better system.
Professor, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure your New Year's greetings card from Chris Grayling is winging its way to you right now.
Rather slowly, I suspect.
Yes, James Wood has.